No, it's interesting. You mentioned meeting James Altucher and Glenn Beck. I mean, their stories really resonated with me. If I had not read Choose Yourself by James Altucher, I don't think I would have written this book. If I had not been introduced to who James Altucher was by hearing him in the Glenn Beck program, I wouldn't have written this book. So it's like these kind of connections do inspire, right? And if both of them held on to identifying closely with their failure events, they would not have resurrected from them and became who they became, which has gone on to influence and impact and bless others with their stories and their message. I just find that inspiring, fascinating, and really full of hope. And that's kind of why I wrote this book.
So let's talk about this. Failure, I always say failure is a discipline. It's supposed to always be in the back of your mind, and failing isn't always a bad thing because it teaches by fire.
That's right, and that's in my book, Failure Rules, the 5 rules of failure for entrepreneurs, creatives, and authentics. I have different rules of failure, and failure rule number 1 is failure purifies. It's the idea that the phoenix must burn to emerge, right? And it's that purification that can happen with failure. Even though you are trying to avoid it, if you anticipate it, then you'll be more wise and know how to metabolize it and leverage and optimize it when it comes. And then old thinking can die, new thinking can emerge. Old ways of being can die, and new ways of being can emerge that can serve you better as you move forward as an entrepreneur, a creative, or just someone trying to live out your most authentic life in the world. To me, there's a through line straight from punk rock to entrepreneurialism, to being authentic, to even kind of the sovereignty of individuality, and even, dare I say, adjacent to libertarian thought. Like, there's just a through line through all of that for me. And so punk rock was the genesis of kind of who I've evolved to be, over the decades. And it all came from discovering it when I was like in middle school.
I hear what you're saying, and there's certainly an aspect of that, right? Especially if you're talking about the religious stuff, right? I mean, even outside of just looking up to these examples of fast successes by entrepreneurs who didn't kind of stumble through an off-road path that was littered with obstacles, right? I mean, on the Jesus thing, I would just say, yeah, that's true, but he also, is the figurehead for a religion that essentially has at its core a mechanism to reconcile you with a God, with the inevitable failures, aka sins, aka hamartia, which means missing the mark, which is all that sin means. Mm-hmm. Basically saying you will fail. That's what sin is. And here's a mechanism to reconcile you with God with that inevitability that will never be cured until you die, purportedly, right? Mm-hmm. So there's that, and the fact that he essentially chose wildly imperfect failures as his disciples. The first person he revealed himself to was a freaking prostitute. So, clearly, I think, if you look at the story of Jesus, you can juxtapose the perfection archetype with also someone that was drawn towards love those who were riddled with failure, right? Sure. Riddled with imperfection. Yeah. So you have that dynamic too.